Greetings to all of you out there. The entire production crew of Political Focus joins me, Samson Websi, in Yaoundé to serve you another installment of the program. Never has an event been so talked about, never has an event been so awaited, and never was an event viewed on television, listened to on radio, and followed on other media platforms as was President Paul Biya's recent speech announcing a major national dialogue on the crisis now rocking the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. In fact, before the head of state made his unusual speech on the 10th of September 2019, speculations had soured in Cameroon's media sphere about the way forward concerning the 3-year bloody conflict. Yet, ever since the head of state announced the holding of a major national dialogue to discuss the problem and seek possible solutions, the public debate now is about the likely issues to be discussed and the possible outcomes. Some Cameroonians with hindsight have been asking whether the dialogue at the end of September 2019 shall be similar to the 1961 conference in Fumban or the 1991 tripartite conference in Yaoundé. Many of these keen observers have been heard whispering aloud in doubt whether a similar approach to what happened in the past was not in itself the very gems that are to blame for what is now popularly known as the Anglophone crisis. Yet optimists in the public debate are seeing the forthcoming dialogue as a golden opportunity to address once and for all this crisis that has seen the spilling of abundant blood ever witnessed in Cameroon for decades now. This second group is pointing to everything they see as different and positive about the announced major national dialogue. This includes the context and the cross-section of expected participants. However, from whichever side of the debate we look at it, Cameroonians are now faced with the daunting task of either facing their problems squarely and addressing them with the utmost good faith, or continuing to watch and quarrel over semantics even as the country suffers a meltdown into the apocalypse. And in the face of this situation, one can only but borrow a leaf from one of Cameroon's genuine intellectuals, the late Professor Bernard Sokikai Fonlon, who decades back asked, and I quote, "Shall we make or mar?" The answer to that question is blowing in the wind. Stay tuned. I will be back in a moment. You are welcome back. Let's now review what the newspapers reported during the week in the company of Charles Tembe, who has our press review.
The press has been agog with news of a major national dialogue announced by President Paul Biya in his address to the nation. Cameroon Tribune runs the banner headline, Northwest-Southwest National Dialogue Convened. The paper reports that the dialogue, to take place at the end of this month, will be chaired by Prime Minister, Head of Government, Joseph John Goute. Cameroon Insider says President Biya has made major peace overtures in the face of the crisis in the northwest and southwest, with the political class, civil society, clergy, diaspora, and even armed groups invited to the national dialogue. On his part, the median headlines, "To sweeten the nation's sour mood, Biya carves in at last, convenes national inclusive dialogue." For Le Jour newspaper, by convening a major national dialogue to resolve the Anglophone crisis, President Biya has resurrected the 1991 tripartite conference. The Post reports that tough-talking Biya convenes national dialogue at last and asks if it will be more promises to be broken. Meanwhile, Cameroon Tribune reports that Prime Minister Joseph John Goute has begun consultation ahead of the national dialogue. After a meeting with government officials from the northwest and southwest regions, the Prime Minister has also received a delegation of the Social Democratic Front Party, led by its Vice President, Honorable Joshua Osi, who submitted the party's proposals for the planned national dialogue. That will be it for Political News Review this week.
Charles Tembe. Cameroonians are now looking forward to the major national dialogue announced by President Paul Biya on the 10th of September 2019 in view of resolving the bloody conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Immediately after the presidential announcement, the Prime Minister, head of government John Gute Joseph, hit the road running with the preliminary consultations ahead of the dialogue proper sometime at the end of the month of September 2019. But even as the consultations are ongoing, reactions and discussions are heating up about the stakes and challenges of the announced major national dialogue. Sam Bukuba captured the public reactions and discussions in the following report.
President Paul Biya's latest address to the nation struck the right note with the Cameroonian people as he announced the holding of a major national dialogue by the end of this month.
I have decided to convene from the end of this month a major national dialogue that will, in line with our constitution, enable us to seek ways and means of meeting the high aspirations of the people of the northwest and southwest regions, but also of all the other components of our nation.
After the presidential address, the reactions have come thick and fast. First from the political class, through Jonathan of the CPDM and Honorable Bapu Lipat of the UPC.
The first reaction is that of satisfaction, is that of joy, because this speech, which was highly awaited by Cameroonians and even at international level, the speech gave hope and satisfaction in Cameroonians. The president talked to his people like a father, faithful to his vision, that of dialogue, which is what every Cameroonian had been looking for.
At the level of UPC, we are very satisfied to see that the head of state decided to organize a dialogue concerning the problem that we are facing now in the northwest and the southwest region.
The Bishop of Mamfe, Andrew Nkea, is the Vice President of the National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon. He says the national dialogue should bring about national reconciliation.
The church would be ready to help that people should reconcile. We cannot be dialoguing and firing guns in the air. This goes to the boys who are holding their guns on the road and in the bushes, and at the same time it goes to the military. We have passed the stage of just shooting at random. We are now going for dialogue. The diaspora should not be giving instructions for more violence when we are looking at dialogue. Dialogue can never be perfect, but it is on the table that we say the dialogue is imperfect, and then we move on to the perfect situation. But I think it is very important for us to be serious. Let us be able to trust. Let us be able to be sincere in the dialogue we are putting on the table. Anyone who is coming to this dialogue should look for the common good. Nobody should come for dialogue to look for personal gains.
On his part, the Emeritus Archbishop of Douala, Christian Cardinal Tumi, has taken initiatives in the past, like the convening of an all-Anglophone General Conference. He speaks about his readiness to make good his contribution in the national dialogue.
I'm quite satisfied, and I hope that those who are around him with the Prime Minister at the head will do everything possible to make sure that this meeting takes place and seriously prepared. The group I am leading will send some of our findings already to the Prime Minister as a contribution. We will see what powers the meeting will have.
Even victims of the Anglophone crisis, internally displaced persons in Yaoundé, have welcomed the announced national dialogue while expressing the wish to see peace return to the troubled northwest and southwest regions.
I hope that it takes place peacefully and all resolutions should be taken in such a way that peace can finally return to our region. We wishing to go back to a peaceful region.
He spoke like a father. We all appreciate what he said, but for us, dialogue is not verbal. Dialogue is action. He's the president. He has spoken. Let the action take place.
Destroying of properties does not solve any problem. So I would just beg on my brothers behind. They should come together and think of it. Come to the dialogue and see what we'll give.
Indeed, Cameroonians in their totality cannot wait for the forthcoming national dialogue.
Sam Bukuba. Our guest on the program today is Honorable Chief Norbert Nagia Mbile. He is the paramount chief of the Batangas of the Southwest region and one of the promoters of the Northwest-Southwest movement on the cessation of violence in the two English-speaking regions. Chief, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you, Samson.
The Prime Minister has already begun consultations in view of the major national dialogue that was announced by the head of state. How are you looking forward to that dialogue?
Sincerely, as a Southwesterner and as an English-speaking Cameroonian, I am so happy. I thank the Almighty and I thank President Biya for taking us down that road of dialogue. It's a road we would have visited long ago, but better late than never. I think that from when our crisis started up to the speech of the head of state on the 10th of September, I have styled it phase 1 of the crisis. And phase 2, for me, starts from the end of that speech to the end of the crisis, when every other thing would come back to normalcy. So I believe that the work that the Prime Minister has been detailed to carry out is very, very important to Cameroon, to the Anglophones. Now, historically, we have been talking how we missed the opportunity of Fumban, 1961. This, I think, should be taken in that light. The head of state has opened up every aspect of interaction. There is no taboo. He even said the armed groups should come on board. I think that means that this is what we have been talking about. If we are saying Anglophones are suffering marginalization in Cameroon, come and say it.
So, Chief, would you like us to continue the discussion that was started in Fumban?
I think it should be part of it. Because if we don't go down that road, we will have to go down one day. I think this is that day. Let us put all cards on the table. If somebody made an error, well, even God has pardoned people who make errors. How much more human beings? Let's correct the error. If there was the absence of a dot over an I or a cross over a T, let's do that now. I am somebody who is extremely proud to be a Cameroonian. And I think that we have more to gain to be in a larger Cameroon than not. However, it doesn't mean that certain specificities should be ignored. It doesn't mean that certain aspects of quick to action or lapses should continue to exist. Let us clean up the slate of Anglophone, Francophone, West Cameroon, East Cameroon fusion, so that nobody ever again would stand up and raise a question on our Cameroonness.
Chief, when you mentioned Fumba, I just want to make sure that we're referring to the same thing. What's in your mind?
You know, I am the son of my father.
That's right.
And my father told me the story before he even wrote his book titled The Authentic Eyewitness Account of the History of Cameroon. I was fortunately amongst his children, one who was very early in my life interested in the political history of our country. And beyond the fact that in Funban, we Anglophones were not ready. What I mean is, 2 weeks before Funban, the West Cameroon political elite gathered in Bali to prepare for Funban. They were brainstorming on general issues. They asked themselves, how would the union look like? What do we need to do? Whereas historians know that President Ahidjo had handed his own proposals to Honorable J.N. Foncha to share with his peers. That wasn't done. So Funban was what? Funban was the West Cameroon elite sitting around a table in a hall trying to look at the proposals of President Ahidjo and trying to quickly take decisions, while on the other side, the Francophone elite who had come prepared with all the facts were dancing and eating and waiting on the Anglophone to finish. And on the fourth day, when it was no more wait could be permitted, could be tolerated, they were called in to rush, take decisions, and many of the things were said to be specified later. And this later, historically, cannot be put on paper. Nobody can say that at a later date, this group or that group met to do this. So it was a lost opportunity. I think that this should not be a lost opportunity.
Chief, you are talking here about Fumban, where the delegation from West Cameroon was not ready. Don't you see that we are in for even a worst-case scenario, because the dialogue has been announced, but the Cameroonians from the northwest and southwest regions seem to be going there in dispersed ranks, even more dispersed than what we had around 1961.
Are we ready?
I will answer that question on the conditionality that, or on the supposition that you are looking at the varied groups with their varied opinions, with their varied stance. Some people want separation, some people want federation, some people say they want federation of this number of units, and so on and so forth. But let us be very sincere and be honest. 11th February 1961 plebiscite was carried out with all the democratic checks and balances, all the democratic parameters in place. It was done by the UN. And the question that was put was clear. Do you want to attain independence by associating with the Federal Republic of Nigeria or by associating with East Cameroon? And the vote was clear. 232,000 in favor of East Cameroon, while 97,000 voted to associate with Federal Republic of Nigeria. So that was done with and is over. We cannot come back to that. The fact that a formal agreement was not written and signed by the two parties is another matter. Some people want to pick on that and say there was no marriage certificate.
If you are just tuning in, this is Political Focus, coming to you from the national station of the CRTV in Yaoundé. Our guest is Honorable Chief Norbert Nangia Mbile, with whom we are talking about the major national dialogue announced by President Paul Biya to resolve the bloody conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. Chief, we're talking here about looking at the way forward, because all of these problems and what happened in 1961 has much to explain about the problems we're having today. So how do you think we should move forward?
This is my humble opinion. With all these halves, bits and pieces and unfinished business here and there, which we all know, there has been life. When you look at 1961 and you look at 2019, you see, without even government's hand, the populations have fused. People have moved right down in Yokaduma, down in the Congo-Brazzaville boundary. You have huge Anglophone communities living there for decades, not to talk of extreme north and all that, and vice versa. People have intermarried. Children have grown. Francophones have sent their children to Anglophone schools until they are even surpassing the Anglophone population in those schools. The culture, we are now seeing a Cameroonness in our English and French backgrounds. So I think that it is very difficult at this point to say that we can go back ante 61. We can only say, okay, there are insufficiencies, but how do we move on?
And so your reference point would be, you prefer to take as your reference point 1972.
I take as my reference point the plebiscite of 11 February 1961, which gave the mandate for the UN to ask West Cameroon to become independent, associating with East Cameroon. I am telling you what has never been said, especially by our brothers of English expression, is that we, the civil servants in West Cameroon, pushed the 1972 referendum very enthusiastically because they saw that their salaries were going to be increased three times.
Okay, Chief, the rest of the story is known and the rest of the history is well known. The issues you are raising now indicate how hot that dialogue would be when it will eventually start. Let's put some of the issues straight. You know that for this major national dialogue announced by the head of state, he has given the contours within which the discussions are going to take place. And he says his main reference document is the 1996 Constitution of Cameroon.
I don't have any nut to crack with that. I don't have enough to crack with that. I think that will not give any disadvantage to any party. All those who complained and who continue to complain that there is a problem in Cameroon say that had that constitution been implemented, this problem would not have come about. And it's true, because when we say decentralization, if decentralization was effective and was immediately put to play, we would not have had this problem. It is the 23 years delay for the implementation of decentralization that has caused people to lose faith in that word decentralization. Today, people don't seem to have confidence anymore in the word decentralization. They seem to think that it will be another hoax.
The head of state in his speech mentioned the word decentralization. So what do you think is going to be a major turn around that will make that decentralization to work this time around?
Gentlemen, I want to be very clear on this. You people shouldn't give the impression that the head of state has said certain topics are not to be debated. I didn't read him that way.
Actually, he didn't say that.
Yes.
He just cited a few of those topics.
Yes.
The list of the topics is inexhaustive.
The way I read him was, he was saying that we want the aspirations of the people to come out. People should be free to express themselves. But listen, even amongst English-speaking Cameroonians, let us be very honest. Some people are just rhetorical. I take a word like separation. Sincerely, it is true that after suffering in the bushes and so on, some people may be derailed again to say that maybe separation were an option. But sincerely, I don't want people to decide out of radicalism and you use that to say that it is the choice of the people. When people are radicalized, they can even say that, okay, take my life. But tomorrow when they reflect, they regret. We should not be emotional over this thing.
Honorable Chief Norbert Nangea Mbile, you are somebody who has interacted with a cross-section of Cameroonians from the northwest and southwest regions. What do you think are their real expectations from the dialogue that has been announced by the head of state?
I will tell you clearly, the Anglophone believes that the government of Cameroon is over-centralized and that this does not permit the regions to develop. Well, you would say that, so I want decentralization. Yeah, in principle, it's decentralization, but the word decentralization, I'm sorry to say it, is suffering a lot of loss of impact. People don't have confidence anymore in that word because for 23 years, the word has been there and their lives have not been impacted. So let us be sincere. The people want power devolution. They want more initiative to be taken by the base. The only difference is that when we come to its implementation, there is a big gap.
That word has lost its real value. It's a word that you are not pronouncing.
The word federation. Well, maybe you had been told that Mbile is an exponent of the federal system of government because I come from a region that has used that word a lot until people are going to imagine 2 states, 10 states, 15, 5 states. I even hear some people have a confederation proposal. Why not? Let me tell you, if we finish this dialogue without the word federation coming on the table, we'll only revisit it. You have to convince Cameroonians that it is not a federation that we need. Look, I am not at the level of words. I'm at the level of reality, of content in words. I take France. France is not a federation. But you go to France, the regions are very autonomous.
But why has that not happened here 23 years after?
That is the problem. And I think if people are sincere, let them release the grip over this system. Let this system move on. But if they don't want to release the grip, we will have to use words like federation because some people believe that in a federation, the law auto-prescribes certain automatisms. For example, electing of a governor, reinforcing powers of local governments, giving royalties to regions that produce this or that. But I don't think that federation has only one interpretation. When you go from country to country that have experienced federation, you see that there are various applications. Federation in itself is not the answer. What is important is in the content.
The content of the federation.
Of the federation or decentralization or what?
Chief, what happens after the convening of this major national dialogue to the Northwest-Southwest movement for the cessation of violence, to which we are a member?
When we formed this movement, our intention was that it should create the enabling condition for dialogue, for the resolution of the crisis. You can see from the name, we debated a lot before we came to that name, Northwest, Southwest Peace Movement on Cessation of Violence. We said that we are ineluctably moving on to a dialogue. So we begged our sons and daughters who are in the bushes and who are carrying guns to lay down their guns. Now, you say, what will be our mission? In principle, our mission ought to end when we have achieved cessation of violence that ushers in dialogue. So we say that when dialogue comes, if the powers that be, if those who organize dialogue think that some of us, especially our movement, can be part of that dialogue, we will be ready.
Chief, as we are getting into this dialogue announced by the head of state, I don't seem to see many people talking about the psychological cause of this conflict because It seems as if the Anglo-Saxon way of looking at things is diametrically opposed to the way the French-speaking Cameroonians will look at it. And that's why maybe in the world you will never see the two cultures working in a kind of centralized system like we have here today.
I want to beg my brothers, this overemphasizing on English culture, French culture, German culture.
Chief, I'm asking this question because you who has interacted with people of the other culture, at least at the level of Yaoundé, you will have a different perception from somebody who is living completely in the northwest and southwest regions.
I agreed. I think that in the same vein, you would ask a Francophone how he would perceive life with an Anglophone. Today, it happens that we are the minority. We could have been the majority in Cameroon. It's true. By asking that question, you are already saying that there are two systems that need to be unified. And I think that is the challenge of Cameroon. I think it's an advantage that we have a bilingual background, that when these two come together, we can work and form a better society. The only problem is people should accept that they can learn from their brothers. It should not be that, moi je ne veux pas entendre l'anglais. I don't understand English. I have friends and associates and family members who have never spoken a word of French. So I am saying that we must have a government that is responsive to that type of a problem. For example, if in Konye subdivision, if the government has to appoint a divisional officer, in Konye you have 60, 70, 80% of the population speak entirely English. If you are sending a Cameroonian who does not master the English language and cannot communicate with the population of that area, there is a problem. If you appoint judges in courts of Anglo-Saxon legal system who cannot speak and communicate in English to the litigants, there is a problem. And these are the problems which must be resolved.
And these are the problems which the president himself has already cited. He himself is aware of all of these complexities. He cited bilingualism. He cited the specificity of our education system. He cited our legal system. But the issue I want you to address is, with what kind of spirit should people come to the table? I believe that the success of this major national dialogue will depend on the state of mind of the people who will participate. When people come very radicalized, not ready to give and take, not ready to re-examine both sides of the story, we may just as well have to reconvene another one.
I agree completely with you. People must come with one frame of mind to build a better and greater Cameroon, not to come out with two countries. People must be ready to let go some advantages in quotes, because they are not advantages, they are time bombs. When you think that you have an advantage of only putting your own people in certain positions of advantage, of employment, of promotion, of better life, and only your people, it is a time bomb. On the other hand, those who have suffered, those who have been neglected, should believe that we can have a better Cameroon. We can have a Cameroon that will take care of even the poor, even the neglected. So Anglophones should know and be sincere that the Cameroon of tomorrow includes them. It is inclusive.
Chief, as we're moving towards the end of this interview and looking forward to this major national dialogue announced by the head of state, there is one accusation. It might not be directly against you because at least you are outspoken, you are able to articulate certain things even when you are in the National Assembly. But some of you, elite of the English-speaking regions, you are being accused of having failed to articulate the worries of the populations, and that is what has brought us to where we are.
I'm very sorry if people think that that is the best way to serve the President of the Republic. I don't think so. You know, I have been critical.
And the head of state has never stopped you from making your point.
Never. I am positive. I don't think that if I tell the head of state that this action may be done a little bit differently, if he doesn't do it now, I am patient enough to wait. And we are fortunate to have a head of state who is able to see those who told him A yesterday, and today they are telling him D. He knows them. And I want to say this. If we do not seize this opportunity offered by this major national dialogue to clean our house, we will only revisit it again. And by Jove, I fear to imagine how it would be. I think we need to be sincere And may God guide Cameroon to face this dialogue with nothing left behind. Nobody should leave anything behind. What are words like federalism? Are they bullets? Are they more than the burnings? So let us say them. Separation will be said, but it will not prosper. Nobody wants separation.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Norbert Nangiambile, the Paramount Chief of the Batangas of the Southwest Region, one of the promoters of the Northwest-Southwest movement on the cessation of violence in the English-speaking regions. It was a pleasure to have you on the program Political Focus.
Yes, Samson, I thank you for inviting me.
And that is where we will take leave of you today. The production team included Charles Tembe, Sam Bukuba, and Nelson Tawe. Our sound technicians were Christian Bigole Bala and Benjamin Bukali, while Juan Pongkam took care of the supervision. For presentation in Yaoundé, I have been Samson Websi, thanking you for listening.